congrats on this. It's so nice that this kind of came out in the middle of all this for people like me that love what you do, and it's just a cool thing. And
oh no, thank you.
Putting this out in the middle of all this.
Yeah.
Was this always the plan, or did things change this year? Would it have been a different?
Yeah, no, it was always the plan to make the record. You know, we had a full week there, and so what you're hearing on Axiom is actually one of the sets. You know, kind of a mix of some sets, but it's like one set of music. But there's 7 nights worth of this stuff, and so we were actually, you know, we planned on recording it and releasing it in this time period, but the recordings actually served as sort of a test for the 2.0 version of the Stretch Music app, which is, you know, an interactive media player that allows a listener or young musician or practicing person to customize their sort of a listening experience and their playing experience with the band. And so, you know, we wanted to try and build a template to where you could do something like that in a live setting, you know, and to also to tether it eventually to visuals. So, you know, I don't want to give away too much IP here, but we're working on some really cool stuff.
I bet that's cool. Just since you mentioned visuals, just the visuals, just the cover and the photos of you as part of this, they're just, you know, gorgeously done. How much fun do you have with that side of things? That becomes a big part of the package no matter what.
Yeah, you know, I think what was really cool about this one specifically is that, you know, we were playing with the production methodology in a way where we were trying to figure out what things we could use for the app, right? But we also wanted to create an experience for a live record that was very different than all of the live records that I've heard. The record is actually built from the listener actually having the perspective of a band member. So when you listen to it, you're actually on the bandstand with us. And that took quite a bit of time to try and figure out how to make a mix of a live record feel that way, but you really feel like you're a part of it. And so we basically have been playing with this like studio record versus live record energy. And so the images that we've been using, the imagery is also kind of hearkening to that. Because clearly it's not a shot of me on the Blue Note stage, right? It's like a shot that was taken preceding those recordings. And so, you know, but we wanted to sort of point to the fact that like it was happening in a way where you're boxed in. So there's all these concentric squares that wrap this really beautiful, I think, arresting image that Eric Ryan Anderson took of me. So all of it is you know, there's a method behind the madness for all of it.
That's so cool. Now you'll probably name a few others after I tell you this, but other than maybe Herbie or somebody, I can't think of artists that are so conscious of the past and pay tribute to the past, but are always looking so towards the future at the same time with your work and with technology. It's a pretty cool thing. Just being in that place, you must be conscious of that, and that's obviously drives you for what you're doing.
Yeah, you know, I think about it all the time, you know, because it's I think specifically for this culture of music, more often than not, the most common associations are tethered to the past. And sort of this idea and this notion that the greatest compositions in jazz, if you prefer to use that terminology or term, come from the things that have already been created. But, you know, I think in a sort of undercurrent to that feeling and, you know, thought process, you know, part of that includes the idea that someone from our generation or a person like me could never contribute the types of things that were contributed in the past. And I have found that the more experiences that I have with my elders and people that come from that time period, they are completely floored and captivated and riveted by all the things that we're creating and that we are coupling with the contributions of the past. So we're very intentional about it. Like, obviously I talked about the app and the technology, but it's like, you know, I have my horns here, you know, like this instrument is a hybrid of a cornet and a flugelhorn. It's called a sirenet, right? It's an instrument that I create. Behind it is another really cool instrument. This one is the first Adjuah trumpet, right? Now, usually when I'm with my elders and they see these instruments, you know, they're like, what are you doing twisting those horns up or whatever that energy is, you know? But when I'm with children, the reaction is completely different. They see it as something they've never seen before. They automatically feel that, you know, like it's something that they authored, right? So this allows me, the shape of this instrument, obviously this is done for, practical reasons and sound, but because it is in a new frame that is obviously tethered to the past, but in a new frame, it allows the younger generation to feel that they're a part of what they're experiencing and they're seeing. And that, in this moment, I think is paramountly important. I mean, when you look at what's going on outside right now, we're in a moment where we have to reevaluate everything. And so that doesn't just relate with how we interact with and treat each other. That also has to do with the things that come from the past and their recapitulations in the modern context.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen your face when you're with those kids and you're showing off. Oh. And
I'm so excited,
It's just as much of a great experience for you as it is for them. It seems the little I've seen of that, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I just love having the opportunity to, to learn and to grow from them as well. And the things that I learned from, the children that we work with the Guardians Institute, or if it's Orleans Parish, the schools there and everything. I can't wait to apply those things in my work context, in my band context, there wouldn't be, a lot of this stuff wouldn't exist if it wasn't, for me, maybe holding on to some of the things that I imagined as a child. And so I think it's really important that we make sure that we're always seeing their perspectives, because, they haven't been conditioned into seeing a certain way. So they actually do see. So, to me, I think that's the greatest gift that we have at the time that we have with the little ones when they're still small.
Now, you haven't done a lot of live records. How important is it for you to, when you document something like that, this is for life, you're documenting this show. Is it responsibility there? You think of some of the great jazz, live records of all time, and a lot of artists' greatest records are their live records when you look back at their discography. So
catalogs.
Do you feel the weight of that when you put out something like this?
No, I think that's also part of the reason why a lot of my peers don't do them. Like, this is for this generation of creative improvised musician or jazz or whatever you want to call it. For this generation, they don't really make live records, right? And so I've made 3. One with David Sanchez and Stephon Harris, 90 Miles, and then we did a record as a 50th anniversary to Miles Davis's Live at Newport record. And so I think after those experiences, I understand why it makes sense to make the live ones. And so I think I have a context that a lot of folks that do this don't really think about, which is, if you make 20 studio records, the production methodology is the same. So you're not really giving, there's, like at the end of the day, like we like Quentin Tarantino films because they have a very specific methodology. But if he had 70 of them, you would probably stop watching after 20 because you know what you're going to get. Whereas, like, as an example, you look at an artist like a Dizzy Gillespie, half of that stuff is live. So the energy is also different. When you listen to Axiom, you hear how much we're communicating. Whereas when you listen to a record like Ancestral Recall, which is basically made in here with me playing, the Achimebu and Crope Tobaz and the Kinkani and Sengba and all of these West African drums and everything, there isn't much of a dialogue in those records because of how we actually produced them. So this also gives my listeners a reprieve from the studio record sound, right? And so for them to also be able to be in the, to have the perspective of a musician on stage when they're hearing it, and they hear, like Weedy Brahma cursing me out, or they hear Elena laughing at something Chris said, it also gives them a part of the experience that a lot of times when we make records in the traditional vein, that you don't get to experience. And that's also our humanity, right? So to me, I think it's really important to make sure that you mix it up, But there's fear. I know I'm running on, but I think there's a lot of fear in that. So much of what we do in this generation is sort of tethered to jazz also being, when you think, when I bring that word up, for a lot of people, they see academia, right? That whole frame for it, has been changed in the last 30 years with the music being sort of intentionally codified as being classical music, a classical form. And I prefer to to root my form of its exhibition really more in it being expansionist music that just looks to show, for me to take a moment and excavate something from an experience, that maybe was great or maybe wasn't so great, but to be able to abstractly communicate that in a way where you can feel my humanity also saves lives. So I understand the import of the music being rooted in it expanding, because that energy is also contagious, right? And that requires that there are mistakes. That requires that I have something to contextualize to become better, right? And so because we live in a time period where most music that's being created is being created from the space of it having to be sharpened and the most clean version of itself, for it to be right or to fit some formulaic value. A lot of times it actually stops us from communicating what we really are going through, which is waking up every day and making mistakes and learning. And those are the things that are most relatable. So the music is really rooted in that more than it having to be a perfectly designed. The album cover is perfect.
You'll
I'll take that.
Yeah. Well, I was at your Blue Note stand, I think a year or two prior. Those weeks in New York there.
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
Which not the same show, but I think there may have been
similar. Some songs.
Mm-hmm. And you had your stretch music time, and then I think there was a moment in the show where you kind of let the audience have a little bit of standard jazz, and you guys.
We played "Eye of the Hurricane" that week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you guys just
Herbie Hancock.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the education you give the audience when you're willing to kind of stop the music and actually talk, and everyone's kind of rapt and everyone listens, and it's fascinating. I get an education from you every time I talk to you or so I appreciate that and lots.
It's mutual love. I just so grateful for you. You're one of our guardian angels in this music out here, and it really is important. And I know this, like, obviously everyone's always like the appropriate forums, but every time I see you, I thank you and I squeeze you, because I know what you mean to us, because it's important for this music to also have a space in the conversation of what's going on now, and I think a lot of times, because so much about how we perceive and deal with music is sort of wrapped up in a sort of Western sense, in that, the things that have the most coverage or the largest brands are usually equated to having the most value. What you have been able to do with the forum that you've created is also give an entry point to folks that come from other cultural spaces that are also saying deeply necessary things musically that also have a utility, right? And so I commend you for that. And so the gratitude is here, man. Always, of course.
I've always looked at you as an optimistic guy with all this. Just
absolutely.
Just kind of your hopes and dreams that we can kind of grab onto.
Yeah, I the hope in the short term is that we develop the ability to become more susceptible to fact in this land. That's the main hope. I think so much of what we go through and what has happened and the energy that has been built in this moment, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts, and the thing for me is there's so many issues that come up because most of the information that's being disseminated to you is being disseminated to you in only through the channels that make sense for what you have told these devices you like, right? And those things can be very dangerous, right? Because it allows you to otherize and marginalize communities without actually having any experiences with them. And so part of the reason we're in this space where we are refighting fights that, these are issues that people died for. These are not, and are still dying for. This is not, this is not
this all
new
the
in
time.
the space.
Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, these are not new issues. But the reason that we have to have the argument from step one is because the information that is being disseminated to you more often than not is only coming out of your cult or class or space or whatever spaces you choose to deal in. And so part of what we do with our music, stretch music obviously is genre blind music, but it is intentionally genre blind in that we understand the necessity to create music that says, though, if I marry the production tech methodology of indie rock music and something like a band like Radiohead, with something that comes with a vernacular type that comes from an Indian raga, with the fervor of the Delta blues and the rhythms of the Saramakan. And what am I saying? I'm saying that all of those people are compatible. All of those spaces are compatible. Yes, we are different, but the issue is always that when you place a value distinction on the differences, and those things are usually a byproduct of the stories that are around you, what you accept. So I would like, my hope is that in the very near future, that we create an environment that is that has equity for everyone, that sees everyone, and that stops placing value distinctions on these things, and that is tethered to fact being a real thing.
Thank you for watching. If you want more extra, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you'll never miss a video.